are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to the ODOT Trucking Informationer, and I'll be your technical support on today's webinar. Before we begin, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. If you have questions or technical issues throughout this presentation, I ask that you please type them into the questions box. Our presenters will address your questions at the end of the
everyone. Thanks, but virtual will have to do and what you need to do in order to be in compliance. And then after that, one of our contract compliance officers is actually going to walk us through filling out the spreadsheet that most DBE trucking firms will need to utilize in order to upload certified payroll into the CRL system. So this is kind of unique. We've not been able to offer that before. And the great thing is this is recorded. So at any time that you would like to go back and you need a refresher, you can always view that YouTube link. And then lastly, we have an exciting announcement that we are forming a DBE Trucking Advisory Group, and I'll talk about that later today. The Ohio Department of Transportation and Snow and Ice Operations, led by Lauren Purdy, and most of you on the call are probably very familiar with this office because they handle certification, reporting, they do the goal setting on projects, our supportive services program, and on-the-job training program. We also have the Office of Civil Rights Compliance, which is our partner office in the event today, led by Katie Laplace. And these are the individuals that you actually see out in the field. You've probably met a contract compliance officer if you've been on an ODOT project as they come out and they do wage interviews, or you talk to them on the phone about goal attainment or things of that nature. And then we have the Office of Access and Equity, which is led by Kimberly Watson, and that covers Title VI and also the ADA Act. And lastly is Office of Outreach, which is also led by Deborah Green. You can see she has a huge responsibility, but that's where my role lies. We are a statewide, regional, and district DBE, SBE, MBE, EDGE, you know, the alphabet soup of certification resource. But basically what that means is we are a liaison to the business community, especially our small businesses. So if you have any questions about your certification, about doing business with ODOT, you want to understand how to find bids, things like that, you can reach out to us directly and we can meet with you one-on-one right now through video call or phone calls, but we're here to serve you and help you make the connections that you need. So essentially, if you don't know who to call, you can always call us and let us help walk you through whatever process that is. This is a copy of our outreach map, as you can region, Southwest Ohio region, since we do have a vacancy. Call any of us at any time and we'll help you reach your goals, hopefully. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Tom Yonka. He is one of 2 contract compliance managers in the state. You may also know him from his days in goal attainment. And he's a wealth of information, and he's going to provide you with some really good information today. I'll go ahead and pass this over to you, Tom.
Information, and what we're going to touch on, as Juleda stated earlier in the agenda, is the updated Proposal Note 7, which deals specifically with DBE trucking. I want to give you an update on what those changes will be coming the first of the year. Those projects that are going to be sold after mid-January 2021, this proposal note is going to be incorporated into those contracts. Also, too, want to touch base on some roles and responsibilities when it comes to prime contractors, you yourself as the DBE trucking firm, and then also to us as compliance with ODOT when it comes to DBE trucking and what we need to ensure so we can count that participation towards the project goals. And then also too, we're going to cover over touch base on prevailing wage, when prevailing wage may be due on a project for your employees, when prevailing wage would not be due. So starting off with the new updates to Proposal Note 7. So prime contractors will be required to provide a master list of all anticipated DBE trucking firms at the time of the pre-construction meeting. So if a prime contractor reaches out to you prior to a bid and wants you to participate on that project, and they do win that project or are awarded the project prior to the pre-construction meeting, they're going to be reaching out to you to get a master list of all your trucks and employees that could potentially be on that project. Prime contractors will be required to complete an affidavit disclosing the DBE trucking operations monthly to the district CCO. So what that means is what is on that master list for their DBE trucking firms that they have submitted towards their DBE plan and what has been approved by the agency. They are going to have to report what was actually taking place in that month. So which trucks, quantities, so on and so forth. On that affidavit, the contractors will select one of the following options: the DBE firm performing trucking utilizing their own equipment and their own workforce, or work that was subcontracted to another DBE. So they're going to have to disclose all that information, along with the DBE firm utilized and any non-DBE trucking that might have been utilized. So if you as a DBE firm need to bring in extra help to complete that contract with that prime contractor, and you bring in a non-DBE firm, that needs to be disclosed, because that participation will not be allowed to be counted towards the DBE goal. And then also too, they'll have an option to state that no trucking was performed in that time frame. Again, with this affidavit, it's going to help the agency determine what participation can actually count towards that DBE project goal. In addition to the compliance that the district staff and the CCOs already perform on monitoring these job sites. So this will help establish what was actually done during that time frame, and then also will go hand in hand with the CUF reviews that are necessary to be able to count that participation. So what's this mean for you as the DBE firm? You will have to work together with the prime contractor prior to that pre-construction meeting. You will need to provide that master truck log to the prime contractor so they can submit that to the district compliance officer at the time of pre-con meeting. Also too, you're going to have to work closely with that DBE prime contractor, with that prime contractor to submit all your activity for that month on that particular project. So moving on to some roles and responsibilities, like I had mentioned before, we're going to go over to the prime contractor, you as the DBE trucking operation, and the ODOT compliance officer for that particular district. So with the prime contractor, they're going to have to establish and submit all subcontract agreements for all DBE firms, including DBE trucking firms. They're going to have to complete their site exchange, their C92, which is a request to sublet that's required for all DBEs on a project. And they also have to submit C92s for non-DBE subcontractors. Provide all subcontractors with specific project and prevailing wage information. All that information is provided to your prime contractor at the pre-construction meeting. Ensure any subcontractors are accounted for and included in communication of the project documentation. So to elaborate on that a little bit, ODOT allows up to 2-tier subcontractors, meaning if you're a direct sub to the prime, you can actually sub to another DBE firm and that participation can count. The firm that you would be bringing on would be considered a 2nd-tier sub. But all that has to be accounted for and submitted to the agency by the prime contractor. They're also responsible to provide guidance and any technical support to you as the subcontractor on that project. Provide a copy of that DBE trucking log to the district CCO monthly. And also, the prime is ultimately responsible to monitor all subcontractors and second-tier subs for compliance. I had mentioned CUF earlier. When it comes to DBE firms, that stands for commercial useful function. It's ultimately the prime's responsibility to make sure that CUF is being performed by all their DBE subs. So the responsibilities as you, the DBE trucking firm, you need to be able to make the requirements to order and pay for all materials if applicable. So if you are supplying asphalt, so on and so forth, the requirement is that you negotiate those pricings and pay for that material and invoice the product. Requirement is that you own all your trucks and equipment being used on that project, or have a long-term lease that is submitted to the agency. Your workforce and drivers driving your trucks must be W-2 employees. They have to be your actual employees. They cannot be a 1099 or an independent. So for them to be under the umbrella of your firm, they have to be your employee. And like I stated earlier, if you do have a long-term lease on a truck that you utilize, that documentation just has to be provided. You'll also have to provide that monthly trucking operation information to the prime contractor, because that's going to be their responsibility to submit that on a monthly basis. And then also too, if prevailing wage is due for any of your employees, you will be required to complete a certified payroll documentation and submit that to the agency. So what are the responsibilities of our district compliance officers? Monitor the ODOT project's activity and documentation as submitted for federal compliance. Our responsibilities are also to perform wage interviews to make sure not only that prevailing wage is being paid, that the correct wage and classifications are being paid, to ensure you as the DBE firm and any other DBE firm on the project is actually performing that commercial useful function, so that participation can be counted toward the project's goal. Review the monthly trucking operations submitted by the prime contractor, and ultimately make sure that you as the DBE firm are being paid timely, along with any other subcontractor on the project. So now we're going to move on to prevailing wage, when prevailing wage may be due to your employees on a project. So there's two types of trucking on a particular project. There's going to be on-site trucking, where you're actually within the site limits of that project, and a few other cases. And then off-site trucking. And prevailing wage will not necessarily be due on off-site trucking. So what is the regulation? So to generalize without a great deal of detail, prevailing wage is going to be required for trucking when a truck and an employee spends at least 20% of their work week on a project site of work. Site of work is going to be evaluated on a project by project basis. And then also too, if you are a DBE owner operator or any other trucking operation as an owner operator, they're actually exempt from the prevailing wage requirement, regardless if it's on-site or off-site truck. So you as a DBE trucking firm, what are some of the requirements that you need to consider? First, you need to identify the type of project and make sure it's a federally funded project. Also, in a little more detail with that, make sure that you know whether there's a DBE goal established for that project, and also if the prime contractor has submitted you towards that DBE goal participation, or are they just bringing you on as a race neutral DBE, which isn't actually going to be counted towards that project's goal. You're going to have to establish a subcontract agreement or a fully executed PO with that prime contractor. And a little more detail on this, especially if that prime contractor has submitted you to the agency as what we call a race conscious DBE participation, meaning that whatever work you perform and they are committing to, that's going to be counted towards that project goal. As long as they submit you towards that project goal, they are committed to the amount that they contract with you. The only way that they would not be able to fully live up to that commitment is if some type of good cause throughout the project occurs, which they do need to submit that request to ODOT for our review prior to approving any of those. If you're on a project and it does not have a DBE goal, or they did not submit you in their DBE plan for participation, it's still a good idea to have that executed PO, but the agency can't really do a whole lot if for some reason, throughout the life of the project, they don't fulfill that commitment. If you are, like I said, submitted towards that DBE project goal, the prime is committed to fully honor that commitment. 3, they're going to provide complete information for that request to sublet, that C92, that the prime is required to submit to the agency. Also, 2, if you're being utilized towards that goal, you're going to have to provide a description of the truck operation specific to the site of work, pickup delivery of any materials, including dump sites for the excavated material. This is all captured on an affirmation form. So if you are submitted towards the project goal by the prime contractor, they will need to have you fill out this affirmation form, which this information is captured. Also, 2, again, you will, starting January of 2021, provide the trucking operation log documentation to the prime as required in the updates in the new proposal note 7. And then also, 2, ensure that your firm is registered in ODOT's CRL system, Civil Rights and Labor, on how we submit certified payrolls if prevailing wage would happen to be due on that project. So the next couple slides are just some examples. This is an example of the wage determination sheet. These wage determinations are submitted given and submitted to the prime contractor at every pre-construction meeting. If the prime should be supplying you information. If for some reason they do not, they are required to, but if you're not able to get that from the prime, you can always reach out to the district compliance officer and we can help you get that specific wage determination for that project. And then the next example is if you are on an ODOT project, you will be to ensure that prevailing wage is due, that the correct wage is being paid, so on and so forth. So this is an example of the questions that will be asked of your driver. So if you are on an ODOT project, please inform your drivers that they are required to speak with the compliance officers when asked, or any other project personnel. So that was all the information that I had. Again, thank you for the opportunity to go through that. I know we have an opportunity for questions later on, but at this time, I'd like to introduce one of our district compliance officers, Sabrina Bell. She is out of District 11, and she's going to go over some of the requirements that will be needed for your certified payrolls. And Sabrina, I'm going to assign this to you right now.
Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. As Tom has mentioned, the wage decision should be given to you from your prime contractor. And this section of the wage decision is specific to truck drivers. And if you note, there is a difference in the rate for District 12 because they pay more into fringe benefits there. The rest of the state all uses this section of that wage decision. And over here on this other side, this is for information purposes, and if you would like a copy of this, you may always reach out to me or to one of the CCOs. But I want you to be aware that the information that you enter into the spreadsheet is based on the straight time rate plus the fringes, and this is the total package. So if you are a non-union company and you are paying those fringe benefits to the driver in cash, you would need to include it in the straight time rate. But I've also made an example of any overtime at prevailing wage. The overtime rate is the straight time only. So it's time and a half of this base $28.89, and then you add the fringes. So fringes are always straight time for every hour worked. You only multiply by 1.5 the base rate. Then I've included an example. Overtime always begins at 40 hours. That's federal law. So for an example, Monday through Wednesday, you worked on a non-prevailing wage job. But then on Thursday and Friday, you worked 8 hours on a prevailing wage job. The first 3 days is all at the regular rate that you pay your driver. The following is all going to be over at the prevailing wage rate. So the first 4 hours on Thursday are going to be at the straight time because you have to hit the 40 hours. Anything over 40 hours are paid at the prevailing wage time and a half rate. So just make note of that. It's always at the 40 hours for overtime. The next thing, if you cannot find the wage.gov, go to wage determination of the year. You can come back. That is based on the letting date, and it's going to give you the wages for that time period. Compliance officer in your area. And it has many different tabs. Now, I have already downloaded. ODOT has on their web URL. This is the L. The vendor resources are on this page, and if you need and an error in import file log, that is if you've converted to XML and you're getting an error, it's not taking the file. Subcontractor payment reporting and so forth, and at the very bottom we have the next code is going to be starting with the 11. We go to the labor tab. All the truck driver codes are going to be in this column, columns axles and over, you would want to use that code associated with a subcontinent Asian. The code will be ASAM. So any ref line to enter it, just as the example has to do a John Doe. But over in the next column, and I can a box, it's going to see just a J. And I'm making mistakes already, which is very simple to do. Making the gender drop down. This one we're going to make a Black American. Then you would enter the city, and we'll shift over. Then the zip wages. If you do, there's even please leave these blank. Then for the next employee, you would simply drop down and start to enter the subcontractor box. You will, and then address information. If you pay them, please select the two, for example, their health insurance. Here, you need to make sure you put your contractor vendor ID for 12th of 2020. So up here, you could change that to be 2020 12/2, or county in PID. That is, you have to make sure that you're reporting this example. I'm going to say that this one is Tusk. It's always going to be the county and the number. Sunday, you click that. Some contractors started on Monday. It's always going to automatically fill those dates in. You don't need to do that. If you have benefit program, whether it's health and wealth, the account link in the zip, but note that when you filled all that out on the employee information tab, it's going to show up here. Then the next one are the craft codes. Select the code. So you want to make sure that you're selecting correctly the truck driver code. Once you've selected that, you click on select labor code. You have a drop down. You select what type that driver was using. And for our example, we're going to select 5 axles and over, and it will show there. Then you go to your days of the week and you enter the overtime or the straight time hours for that particular employee. And we're going to say they worked 8 hours, all in cash, $28.89. A different amount will be shown in this box. Being paid on the employee rate should also be listed. And I do have that overtime rate. It would be child support. In column, we're going to say, and we're going to say that that person earned $1,200 for the entire pay period. You enter your FICA, your federal income tax, state income tax, Medicare, and it will make those deductions and add them over here. So we're going to say FICA is 100, federal, we'll just make some numbers up. All of that, employer, anything you are charging the employee, convert your template. So your spreadsheet, you will need to go to recommend that you save it as the week ending and the project number. That way you can go back to it. You're going to need that. And then every time that you have a new payroll, you're going to change that name. So I recommend as you enter these dates, you keep track of them in a file or on your desktop. And I always would download one copy of the spreadsheet and save it as the master copy, so that when you have different weeks, you just make a copy of it, change the name, and save it again. Once you've converted it, which this one, it would not, and it would have to be correct information. One of the things that the AstroWare does recognize is if your vendor ID number is incorrect or make a mistake along with your spreadsheet and sends that you're unsure of. Again, please contact CRL support. Sometimes this is not something you do. I am going to turn it back over to Juleda to finish the presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sabrina. That was a lot of good information. You may need it. Microsoft Teams, that way that members have more flexibility. So even if you're, not centrally located, please apply if you're interested, because there are so many different platforms out there that you won't have to worry about traveling to get to those meetings. Chosen members need to be represented by their owner of the firm at the meetings. Now, if the owner can't attend, they can designate an individual within their firm to attend on the behalf, as long as they're knowledgeable about the industry and can contribute to the discussion. But preferably, if you're the owner, we would like to have you be the one that comes to these meetings. And you do have to commit that you will attend at least 3 of the 4 meetings in order to remain a member. We're going to do an application process for the committee to try to make it as fair as possible and to really see who's interested in joining. Part of the selection, we want to ensure that there's representation from each region. And if you refer to in these meetings and you're really representing the trucking companies from your sizes, and consideration will be given to how many years a company has been in business, and also if a firm is actively working or has worked on ODOT or LPA projects. Applications begin today. They are due on December 30th by the end of the business day, so about 5 p.m. And we will notify trucking firms that are selected by the week of January 11th. And during that notification, we will determine the best time to have the first meeting, which we plan to have in February of 2021. And meetings will take place in February, May, August, and November. I'm going to click on the link so I can just give you a basic overview of what that your company has. You do need to be DBE certified, but you have to ensure that we are choosing companies that are from different regions of the state, how many trucks your firm owns, how many years you're here. So let's say you just started your business industry or things like that, anything you want us to take into consideration. And then just a simple question, are you currently doing work on an ODOT? If no, and I'd be good. Lisa or Lynn, if you'd like to go ahead and looks like we have 2 questions, so please put anything else in the chat right now and we can get to the 2 questions that have been asked. We have plenty of time to get to any questions that you have right now.
Okay, this is Lynn Stevens. I see a question. What is the regulation around brokering trucks, acceptable or not acceptable?
That goes to you, Tom.
Sure, not a problem. There's no regulation against brokering. I think the misconception is we're not, as an agency, not telling you as a DBE firm that you cannot broker trucks to other firms on a project. What you have to understand, though, is if you do broker, whether it, there's 2 scenarios. You can broker trucks to DBE firms. If you do that and you want that participation to count towards the commitment to your firm for that particular project, you have to submit that DBE firm as a second-tier sub to you. So you would be subcontracting part of your work to that DBE trucking firm. And in turn, that DBE trucking firm is going to have to follow the same requirements as far as commercial useful function, so on and so forth, that you as the first-tier sub is going to have to abide by too. So you can broker to, and when I say broker in a DBE sense, you'd actually be hiring that DBE firm as a second tier subcontractor to you. So you would have to submit that information to your prime contractor. They would have to go through the same process of filling out an affirmation, the prime second tier sub to the agency, and then you're going to have to submit the executed purchase order or fully executed sub agreement between you and that other DBE firm. If you broker to a non-DBE firm, please understand that whatever participation those non-DBE trucking firms perform will not count towards that goal. So if that prime contractor is expecting you as the DBE firm to fully execute their commitment and you broker non-DBE trucks, we will have to deduct that participation. So the prime may fall short of their project goal on that. So in summary, we're not saying that you cannot broker trucks. What you have to understand is the way that we count DBE participation. If you do broker and you broker to non-DBEs, that participation will be deducted from the prime's commitment towards that DBE goal.
Okay, thank you. And a second question. So how do I bill the contractor the overtime prevailing wage in your example? I guess that's for Sabrina, maybe?
Yeah, Sabrina or
I'm not really sure what their question is. I would just make sure that if you're going to have a subcontract agreement with the prime contractor, you set your rate accordingly and put in your subcontract agreement. If there is any overtime or any prevailing wage, that your rate may reflect that change. Tom, you may want to, go a little further with that.
Sure. No, Sabrina's right on point with that. Again, being a DBE, you are required to have the opportunity to negotiate your own rates with the prime contractor. They can't just dictate rates to you per the Code of Federal Regulations. Now, they have to give you the opportunity to negotiate that rate. If they present a rate and you agree to it, that's part of the negotiation, but you are well within your rights and regulations to say, no, this is my hourly rate, and negotiate back and forth with that prime. But talking on the same page as Sabrina here, when you do enter in an agreement with the prime contractor, we highly recommend that you give them any rate possible that you may bill at. So give them a straight hourly rate, give them the overtime rate that you're going to bill, and then also give them the prevailing wage rate. So a lot of times what happens where you anticipate you're only going to be doing off-site trucking on this project, but things change and your driver, falls within that prevailing wage requirement, and now that rate is due to them. We highly recommend that you put that in your agreement. So when you do have to pay those prevailing wage rates, it's already in your agreement with the prime when you submit your invoice to them.
Okay, next question. Our drivers are paid 2 weeks in arrears. Is this a conflict with prevailing wage requirements?
Yes, it would be. Both federal law and state law require that anyone working on our projects are paid every week. So that would need to be changed accordingly.
Okay. Next, would on-site prevailing wages also apply to material being hauled to the site? i.e. stone, asphalt, etc.?
No, on-site is in reference to work that is actually being done within the project limits for more than 8 hours in a typical 40-hour week. So if you're just hauling stone or asphalt to the project, dumping and leaving, no, it is not due prevailing wage.
Okay. Next, the hours show as regular 16, but you are saying I have to pay 4 regular and the rest overtime pay. That's the question.
That is if they've reached their 40 hours. It doesn't matter where they are working, if it's regular time or prevailing wage time. The overtime starts once they've passed 40 hours. So it may be Wednesday or Thursday, but when you meet that time, that's when their rate changes.
Okay, great. That was the last one I see in the box. Any other last minute questions? Feel free to enter them, attendees. Let's see. Okay, so how do I bill the contractor then? I think you touched on that. Maybe you can just repeat that again about negotiating the fee.
A suggestion, whoever has that question, can you put your contact information in the chat? We may want to maybe talk it over directly with you about billing the contractor.
Okay. Our drivers are paid weekly, but for instance, what they will be paid this Friday is for work performed 2 weeks ago. Is that okay?
The week that they've worked on the project, that certified payroll is due a week after and no later than 2 weeks. You have to report that.
Okay, so this may be a follow-up. Every week we need to enter information in the payroll Excel sheet for every driver. That was a question. Every week we need to enter information in the payroll Excel sheet for every driver.
Correct. Now, if you have a master copy, as I had stated, and you've saved that master copy, it's going to have all your employee information, and you only need to select those drivers that you are reporting for that week. Just have all the information in that master copy and go from there.
Okay. I don't know if this comment. They won't pay the overtime if it shows 16 regular. So that's just how it came through. Oh. And then please specify on-site job limits. Is there a mileage regulation on job site?
No, there's not a mileage regulation for job site. It's within the project limits. So when you enter, construction begins, and you leave, construction ends. Those are the project limits. However, if you're dumping somewhere that's adjacent or it's only for that project, that will be decided on a project by project basis.
Okay, that was the last question. Don't see any more that came through within the last few seconds.
And if anyone has any other questions, like I said, we'll be sending out contact information and all of that. And Sabrina or Tom or any of the compliance officers would be happy to talk to you one-on-one about your specific situations, because we know that every job site can be a little bit different, and every business is a little bit different. So hopefully you got some really good information today. It does look like one more question came through. We can go ahead and ask that.
Are the hourly payments for drivers shown earlier for an example, or is that what we are legally required to pay them?
The rates that I had listed in my example, I took directly from the wage decision. That is the rates that are required at this time. If the wage decision changes, you will always need to pay what the wage decision states at that time in the future. For any non-prevailing wage rate, you are required by law to at least pay the minimum wage. But if it's on prevailing wage, you must go by the wage decision.
Okay, great.
And again, to jump in on that, Lynn, if the prime contractor is not cooperating or helping you determine that wage classification, again, please, if you have any questions, reach out to your district compliance officer where that project is located, and we will get you the correct wage determination.
Okay, great. Don't see any more right now, so.
Okay, well, I think we can go ahead and conclude the webinar. We really do appreciate your time. Hopefully we'll be able to get you all this information in the next few days, so be on the lookout for that. If you have any other questions or anything pops up in the chat, we will get a copy of that and be able to answer that with our follow-up email. And I just want to say, you know, a big thank you to Tom and Sabrina for sharing all this great information with us. And we hope that the companies on the call will apply for our trucking advisory committee. And if you have questions about that, let us know. And I guess that's all. So if anybody else doesn't have anything, we will get that out to you soon. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks, Juleda.